Hello, everyone. So here we are at this amazingly vibrant, and I have to say, really epic conference on the topic of wisdom. So let's hear it for how epic this is, first of all. So a funny thing about wisdom, right? When was the last time you saw wisdom? It's kind of like love or friendship or happiness. You can't really see it or hold it or touch it. And yet, it's something we feel, and it's something that's vitally important for all of us. And so we've been talking a little bit about all of the domains in which it's important to cultivate wisdom. And today we wanted to offer a little bit of reflection on wisdom in the workplace, what it looks like, and specifically wisdom in working life, actually. Whether or not you go to a place to work, we all work. So what does wisdom look like in our working lives, and why does it matter? By some estimates, we spend about 40% of our time working, which is about 90,000 hours. And we spend some of our most productive time, energy, and attention working. So what we wanted to do with this group of folks is really explore what it means to live and work in a mindful way and with wisdom. And also, we wanted to invite these folks, who happen to all be friends, so it's great to see you here, to really explore these issues because they are some of the leading-edge thinkers and practitioners in this field of wisdom, well-being, productivity, and work. So let me offer some brief introductions, and then we'll just jump into it. So Tony Schwartz is the founder and CEO of the Energy Project. And if, please add to this if I don't get it all. But I believe the mission is to help organizations better meet the needs of their employees by looking and thinking about their spiritual, mental, emotional, physical well-being. Tony's also a noted author. He wrote Be Excellent at Anything and a number of other books. He's written a New York Times article that in the last month is the most emailed article, which I think is called Relax, You'll Be More Productive. Awesome. He blogs for Harvard Business Review, written several Harvard Business Review articles, and has been an editor at Newsweek. And then Pam Weiss is the founder of Appropriate Response. It's a company that offers executive coaching, mindfulness training, and an award-winning personal excellence program, which is a 10-week program, 10-month program, right, that facilitates group and personal transformation in the workplace. And then Patrick is the director of research and development at Sirota Survey Intelligence. It's a global consulting firm that looks at survey research, leadership development, employee engagement, and organizational performance. So I have one question for all of you, which is wisdom in working life. Why does it matter? What is it, and why does it matter?
I'm not going to talk over you.
So actually, let's start with Pam, because backstage we were talking about what you call your soapbox issue. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
So I'll say first something about what I think wisdom is and isn't, and then I'll say my soapbox issue that we were talking about behind stage. So what I see a lot in the workplace is that there is an increasing emphasis on what I would call moving across the horizontal plane of life. Staying on the surface, going faster, being more effective, being more productive, etc. It's all good, important, etc. What I see in the workplace, in the people that I work with, is an enormous hunger to drop vertically. That people are hungry, sometimes starving for a deep connection with themselves and with one another. And that, for me, is what wisdom is all about. It's the shift from moving across the surface to dropping and touching into our depths, which Jack so beautifully spoke about and invited all of us to tap into in ourselves. My soapbox issue that we spoke about is that I come to what I do, which is bringing this work into the workplace from over 25 years of Buddhist practice. And my aspiration as a Buddhist teacher is not just to help people slow down, calm down, and de-stress or be more efficient, which I think is great if that happens. And as far as I can tell, mindfulness can really support that. But that just scratches the surface. of what's possible when we begin to practice. And one of the difficulties that I've seen is that as someone coming in offering this beautiful practice in which we have not just the possibility of calming down, but the possibility of touching into this vast and magnificent potential that we all hold inside, it's a very hard thing to explain because it's deeply experiential. And so often just getting your foot in the door in an organization that's looking for answers on the surface can be prohibitive. And yet, as soon as people step in and they begin to have the direct experience, just as all of you did, even for a few moments, a few minutes ago, it's amazing what happens and what's possible. So my soapbox issue is, let's not sell mindfulness short. Let's not just reduce it to stress reduction or quieting ourselves or calming ourselves, but let's give it its full breadth and invite what's actually possible for each of us as we begin to practice ourselves in the workplace and to offer these practices.
So, Pam, I mean, I crave depth as much as the next guy or you. And at the same time, the work that I do and our organization does is with organizations where depth is about number 8 on the list of possibility, and it's a process. And so what we're trying to do is to meet people where they live, meet some of these leaders where they live. And it's not contradictory to what you're saying, but it's slightly different in focus. So to me, the pressing immediate issue of the moment in organizations is that we live in an incredibly and increasingly complex world. Demand is rising relentlessly, but our capacity to meet that demand isn't rising, and indeed it's being depleted. And so what is capacity? Capacity is the fuel in your tank. It's what makes it possible to bring whatever your skill and talent are to life in the crucible of this pressure. And it's very, very difficult to be able to do that under the conditions that we have. So the shift, the place we're trying to meet organizations is to say it actually is about helping people to meet people's needs physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, represents a paradigm shift. Right now, the focus for most organizations is on getting more out of people. What we're trying to say to them is, no, your best bet is to invest more in them so you free them and you fuel them and you inspire them to bring more of themselves to work every day. And the one other point about this, the extraordinary effect of doing this. There's a study that was just released last December or November. It's a Towers-Watson study around engagement. And engagement's the vehicle to measure, the soft vehicle to measure the relationship between a person's bringing themselves to work and their effectiveness. And there are 100 studies that now suggest that the more engaged people are, the better they work. Well, this new study shows, sure enough, 30,000 people, 50 countries. It shows that when the organizations in which people are most disengaged, they are making an average of 10% return on their investment. Because we've got to make this about, for organizations, something they understand, which is the result they'll get if they make this investment. So the average organization that doesn't have an engagement population is making 10% return on their 10% margin. The traditionally engaged organization is making 14%, which means it's much better to have engaged employees than not engaged employees. But they've now discovered that engagement by itself is not sufficient to drive the highest and most sustainable levels of performance. And what's required now is something called sustainable engagement. And what that depends on is the organization's willingness to invest in the well-being of its employees across those 4 dimensions: physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. And when they do that, the average operating margin goes to 27%.
That's awesome.
Awesome. Thank you, because it's 3 times what it is for a disengaged population and twice what it is for a normally engaged. So the idea of being able to say to an organization, if you invest, you'll get a return, is a win-win.
Good. Thank you. Patrick, so this is actually kind of your docket here, right? Because survey intelligence, right? Tell us a little bit about that and some of the things you all are learning.
Well, I want to pick up on the points that 3 of you have just brought up. Try to weave them together. So let me just tell you a little bit about some of the data trends that we're seeing. I wish I could actually see you, but it's light up here and dark out there. We're finding, so we survey about 1 million employees a year, and we've been looking at a million.
1 million, yeah.
Yeah, we've been looking at trends over the last really decade, especially around the Great Recession. And I think this will pick up on some of the things you're talking about. What we're finding is that engagement levels have stayed the same despite the recession. 8 out of 10 people are engaged at work. The second positive thing...
Disengaged.
No, engaged.
8 out of 10 are engaged?
Yeah, that's what we see. Now, the second thing we see, we work with some really good companies, but, it's 1 million employees, and so that's the first thing we're seeing. The second thing is, coming out of the recession, a lot of basic needs are being restored. So we're seeing work-life balance coming back. We're seeing satisfaction with pay and benefits. All that's coming back. And then the third thing is people like their jobs. Okay, that's the good news. The bad news, though, is that stress levels are through the roof. So we are seeing half of the population in our database, they're overstressed. Confidence in leadership is on the decline since the Great Recession, and also the connection with immediate managers. And so I think this gets to this point of what I picked up listening to both of you was people are working harder, but they're not working smarter. They're not working wiser. And I think it comes back to your question, Rich, what is a wise organization? And I think that's a powerful question. And I think if we just think about the hallmarks of what would make for a wise organization, that's a tremendous starting point. I mean, I think one thing is it's an organization. I was an English major undergrad, and I keep going back to Moby Dick. It was my favorite book. And it serves as a consulting touch point. I'm not sure why, but I think the data I described describes the Pequod. It describes an organization where people are working hard, but they're not in a wise system. And so I think a wise system is one where people are listening to each other. There's a quietness, there's a stillness, there's action. But that system is having a positive impact on its members and on the environment. And I think that requires bringing the whole person to work and sinking down into this depth. So, a whole bunch of thoughts.
Go ahead.
I just think I will just say that I think that if we're going to transform the workplace, that we have to be willing to challenge the language that we use. And as long as we're using transactional language to talk about human beings, and we're talking about, I give my employees this so that I can get that from them, we are never going to drop vertically. We are always going to be treating people like objects. And what I see is that organizations are groups of people, and that the people in those organizations, as I said, are starving for something more than being treated like objects. And what I see is that when we get a chance to get in the door and actually meet people where they are, which is with all of their difficulty and beauty, that they open right up and walk right in. And so I think that if we keep trying to walk into an existing paradigm, we're going to keep creating the same distress. Maybe it will get worse.
And I think that's, if you think back 100 years, the epitome of the organization, Max Weber's bureaucracy, right, and Frederick Taylor with scientific management. And that really, there was a certain faith that we were putting in the system. And I think that's not going to work in the 21st century. It's really faith in people, faith in each other. That's, I think, the starting point for a wise organization.
So my question is, how then do you cultivate the conditions for all of this to arise?
Yeah, well, I think the two answers to that question. The first one is that you make it clear that there's a win-win for an organization to change and affect its value exchange. The value exchange for the last 200 years between employers and employees has been money for time. That's a very thin, desiccated exchange that doesn't enrich, in the deepest ways, either side. So what you do is you create an organization which is allowing people to discover and enrich and grow their own capacity across the different dimensions of their lives. And by doing that, they are happier, they're more focused, they're more engaged, they're more sustainable, and they perform better. This is not going to be a zero-sum game that's going to end up resolving this. So, what we have found is that the most powerful thing, Rich, that I have found in the last year in working in our organization is that for 10 years we've been doing this work, and we go out into lots of great organizations, including Google, where we're very active. But in the last year, what I've done is to recognize that we have to bring our attention back simultaneously into our own organization, and we've used it as a living laboratory for the practices, because if we can't do it as 30 people, why would we expect that an organization of thousands of people can do it? And here's what we've discovered. The hunger in people, the deepest hunger in people, I believe, I don't know if this is the deepest, the most visceral hunger in people is to be valued and to be valuable. Those are very deep, deep needs. And how do you allow people to build a life that makes that possible? And what we've found is that people, we've discovered this in organizations first, can't change by themselves. It's too hard. The existing norms are too great, the habits are too strong, that what it does to make change that matters, it takes a village. It takes a community. And what we've been able to begin to do at the Energy Project with ourselves and then bring out to our clients is to begin to build communities of practice, or to begin, in our own case, to build a community of practice, a way of engaging with each other emotionally and spiritually that allows people to feel safe and supported and celebrated and held accountable in making real changes that enrich their lives.
Mm-hmm. Great. All right, what else does this look like? Concretely, what does it look like?
I would say, in a word, connection. That we are helping people, and mindfulness, I have a client who calls mindfulness a superpower. And mindfulness is a superpower for connection, and that ultimately we're helping people access the capacity to connect deeply with themselves, and, as you're saying, Tony, to give people opportunity to meet in communities where they can connect with one another. And we often say we're just creating spaces where people can be real. And when we make that offering, when we offer that up, it's amazing what happens. Look what we're sitting in the middle of today. Yeah. So it's actually very simple. It's just not that easy.
Well, there's also a practical part of it, which is that we've learned that, notwithstanding this very introspective audience, if you go across the country, and particularly if you go into these large organizations, the inner life is terra incognita. It's a vast, unexplored territory for people. And they have, in effect, no real sense of how they work, of what makes it possible for them to show up physically with all their energy, or emotionally with the kind of energy that serves you best. So one of the things that we've found is incredibly useful to people is to honor the inner life and then recognize that you have to give people some tools to be able to change. And that's why I call it a community of practice, because you get good at what you do repeatedly, and you don't if you don't. So to really make this possible for people and to create in organizations the sense that this interior work matters is a critical component of it.
Yeah, and I think that's a key point, which is encouraging leaders and organizations to encourage their employees to bring their whole self to work, right? That it's not just about showing up and playing a role professionally. It's about bringing that full self to work, your spiritual side, your physical side. We did a study. One of our clients asked a really unique question on their survey, and that was about the extent to which employees felt safe to express faith in the workplace, or there was a certain respect. I forget how it was worded exactly. But the essence is this. We found that in teams where there was this regard and respect for the individual and their interior life, those teams were in fact more engaged. So I think that's a part of making an organization wise. Connection, you said, values, whole self at work. I do think there's a need for the business case, as you were saying, Tony. And I do think we as practitioners need to live what we're advocating.
Yeah, maybe in the last few minutes here we could talk a little bit about the why does this matter, right? So we talked about what it looks like, what it could be, sets of practices, but why does it matter?
Well, it matters because we're in a world that's no longer sustainable the way we're living it. We talk about it from the perspective of energy. It's the same issue in the planet that it is for individuals, which is that you can't keep spending down unless you are comparably renewing and restoring, and expect that you're going to have what it takes to operate effectively in a world of infinite demand and complexity. So we are operating with 20th century work practices in a 21st century world. That's nuts. We haven't caught up with the technology that we have created and understood how to put it underneath our own control to make it serve us instead of having it run our lives. So it matters because we're not going to make it if we don't change the way we work.
Yeah. That sounds good. Pam?
I would just say that the world needs us, simply. And it doesn't need us just to be more productive, and it doesn't need us to be more efficient, and it doesn't, yes, all those things are true. But as you were saying, the world needs all of us. It needs all of our wholehearted engagement with ourselves, with each other, with the planet. And it's up to each of us to bring ourselves fully forward into everything we do. And for me, it's a great gift to have the opportunity to go into organizations where we can invite people to do the same. Because it may be good for a company's bottom line, and I'm not as good at making the business case, which is why I'm not as successful as Tony. But I do believe very strongly that we can have an impact, because I've seen it in hundreds and hundreds of people who we've worked with. And without all of our effort in that way, our wholehearted effort, we won't make it individually or collectively.
Yeah, I think that's a powerful point. I don't think unwise systems are going to survive in the 21st century. I think they're not going to be as successful, and if they do survive, they're going to have a negative impact on the lives of their employees and the communities they serve. So I think given where we are as a planet and as a group of people, that we need to figure out what it is to be a wise and mindful organization and how we can create that.
So one more thing, Rich, which is what I wrote about in this New York Times article 10 days ago or so. The whole point of the whole argument I was making is that less is more. That we have the assumption that more, bigger, faster, again, a 200-year-old assumption, more, bigger, faster is better, when in fact we are designed as human beings to pulse rhythmically between spending and renewing energy. And we are healthiest when we do that. And so if you're only spending energy, you're burning yourself down. And what's been beautiful for me in our experience at the Energy Project is that we can have a company that's growing rapidly, that's doing well, but that is allowing people, in our first year we give people 4 weeks of vacation. In our second year we give them 5 weeks. We don't email after 6. We leave at 6. We don't email in the evenings. We don't email on the weekends. We have a room where people can go and sleep and nap during the middle of the day. We tell people, we encourage people to go out for lunch. And all of these things are about renewing, restoring, reflecting, doing things that have not been traditionally okay in organizations. And it works. You can have a life. So you can get, when you learn to manage the relationship between spending and recovering skillfully, you can get more done in much less time, have more of a life, and be more sustainable.
Thank you. Thank you. Do you have any last words?
I think it's a great point, and it changes my mind. You know, it's funny because I just started working at home, and I do take now 10 minutes at lunch to meditate, and I never felt safe doing that in my organization. It's a wonderful, friendly organization. So I think we need to be courageous and practice what we preach.
Yep. Solves for almost anything, by the way. Pam, any last words?
You know, we talk about mindfulness and wisdom practices, but I just want to echo again that for me, those practices are keys, tools, skills, capacities that we build to open our hearts and to find that kind of deepening of connection with ourselves and with others. And that it's not that we have to teach people how to do that. We just have to give them the opening. We just have to make the invitation. We just have to make it accessible. And then the power of that love that is the fabric of what we are and who we are has the opportunity to come forward and to actually lead instead of follow.
And with that, thank you each,
Thank you,
my
Rich.
friends.
Eat and recover.
Thank you. Be well.